Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. I'm your host, Neil Orfield, joined once again by DFS legend Terry McBride. This show is sponsored by the Awesemo Best Bets Discord, where Awesemo experts use the tools to identify the best bets available every day. While you're coming in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the Awesemo YouTube channel if you haven't already. Terry, before we start, I need to congratulate you. This is our first show together since you took down first place for $30,000 on FanDuel on Friday. Congratulations. How does it feel to get the big one out of the way early?
Pretty good. It's definitely, monkey off the back for the start of the season. Definitely is validating for, coming on shows and telling people what I think of picks and all of that. It always feels good to be able to knock one down and, feel right about that. And definitely, thank you, pal. And thank you to everybody out there, all the kind words and tweets, the mentions in chat and everything. I really appreciate it. It's very nice of everybody. So thank you very much. And
Really fun to see you. I mean, you deserve it. You put in the work every day. You come in, you come on these shows, and you have all of the information that anybody could possibly want. So really well deserved. Fun to see that. All right. We should, I suppose we should jump into this slate. We got a 10 gamer now. We lost the Detroit-Pittsburgh game to the rain. Any other weather concerns for you?
Just that weird one in Chicago. It looks like it's just kind of one of those gray, ugly Chicago kind of days. A lot of wind blowing in toward home plate. So should be decent pitching environments. I don't think there's any risk of postponement in that one. Not from what I saw earlier in the day. It just seems like, like I said, like a Chicago kind of crappy day. So definitely favors pitching in that one. But otherwise, I think we're going to play pretty clean.
Okay. Another thought that I've been having lately is that we've been seeing much lower scores, and I've been thinking about shortening my stacks, I guess more so on DraftKings and FanDuel, because on FanDuel you're already limited to 4 players from a team, 4 batters from a team. Do you think there's any merit to the idea of shortening your stacks on DraftKings from like 5-3 or 5-2 to maybe 4-4, 4-3, that kind of things? Just because we just haven't been seeing 5 batters from a team do great very often this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very, very limited in terms of offense this season. And it's stark when looking at when I have my team stats board up and I'm looking at splits. It happened to me in the middle of a show the other day when I was calling somebody out and they had, like a 130 something ISO, and it was decently ranked. Like I'm looking at the board right now against right-handed pitching, the 149 ISO carried by Miami's active roster ranks 13th in baseball. A 149 ISO is not very good for power. They've been good creating runs, 19% better than average, only a 2.52% home run rate, but that also ranks 14th. So there's just not been a lot of power. There's not been a lot of driving the baseball. There's not been a lot of quality sequential hitting, converting runs, but really just the power has been out. I think that this will come around a little bit as the weather warms up, as we get more into hitting conditions. But you do have things like, the oddball park changes in Baltimore now. Take one of the best hitting parks in the league and turn it into one of the best pitching parks. That's going to have an impact in the overall numbers. It's going to have an impact on 2 specific teams anytime there's a game there, more to the point about the stacks. But yeah, I think there is, given that it's a league-wide issue of a lot of power just being missing from the game right now. People point to the ball, people point to all sorts of different factors. It is maybe a worthy consideration, at least for now, to maybe shorten those stacks. And I think you're still looking for those strong correlation plays. So you're looking at maybe instead of 5 going to 4, something like that, like a minor change where you're still very much focused on stacks. I'm not saying just roster, 3 guys from one team and then, 8 different guys from all other teams scattered all over the place. Focus on continued process and, continuing the plan, but maybe get a little bit looser around the edges, at least for now. And you do see that, with some of the, not to be results based about it, but some of the lineups that have been racking up more scoring this year have had a couple loose plays, maybe 2 one-off type plays in them with a 3-3 or something along those lines. So a little bit of consideration for differentiated lineups, but over the long haul, over the course of many seasons, we've been kind of proven out to be, the full stacks are the best approach. So I do still want to stick with that in the long term and over the long haul.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I plan to, I think, mostly stick with large stacks. And on a 10-game slate, I think I'm more likely to still stick with a 5-man stack too. But maybe on a shorter slate, I'd be more inclined to go to like a 4-3 on DraftKings, 4-3 with a one-off, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for a large slate like this, I think I can still kind of hope that one of these games will, one of these teams will put up enough runs to get 5 players into a good lineup. Anyway, we better get to this slate. We got 10 games still left. Let's start with the Twins at Baltimore. Twins 4.2 implied team total, Baltimore 3.3. We've got Joe Ryan on the mound for the Twins, having a great career so far, going up against Bruce Zimmerman. Let's start with the Joe Ryan side and against the Baltimore bats. Do you have any interest in Joe Ryan going up against Baltimore? And then do you have any interest in the Baltimore stat coming back?
Yeah, sure do have some interest in Joe Ryan. Even at 10-2 on FanDuel, I think he's worth that price. This kid is this good. I don't think there's really much question about it. He'd come up 30% strikeout rate over his first 23 innings in 4 starts this season, pitching to a 3.28 xFIP, a 0.70 whip. He's induced a 13.8% swinging strike rate. All of that is right in line with the cup of coffee that he had last season. It was 25 and change innings over, I think, 5 starts last season. He's sustained this success over, roughly 50 innings now. It's not the biggest sample in the world, but it's believable now. And this is a kid who came up as a premium prospect. He's got excellent movement on his pitches. He doesn't have an overwhelming fastball, but he's got a lot of horizontal movement on it. He keeps batters on their toes and, really is good at the deception part of the game, at getting swing and miss, as we can see in that swinging strike rate. And he's got a solid above average CSW percentage of 31.5%. He's been decent at limiting hard contact, 37.3% hard hit so far this season, 5.9% barrel rate. Those are pretty solid numbers going up against a very weak Baltimore lineup that has been just atrocious against right-handed pitching so far this year. Taking a look at the active roster for Baltimore, we're talking about a team with a 109 ISO, a 24.2% strikeout rate, created runs 15% worse than average, and a home run rate that ranks 29th in baseball with a 1.49%. So it is a great spot for Joe Ryan. Could he, regress back, be turn back into a rookie, turn into a pumpkin, whatever on us? Sure. On any given slate for a rookie pitcher, that's probably going to happen to him 5 or 6 times this season. But I really like this spot in this matchup for this pitcher. So I'm happy to get there. I think 14.2% ownership on FanDuel is appropriate and comfortable. 27.2 on DK. It's maybe a little bit high, but I think you're happy to go there at 9,500. I think the price is a little discounted.
I'm glad to hear that you believe in Joe Ryan long term. You used a stat there that I don't think I'm familiar with. I'm going to out myself as a noob here. CSW, is that caught? I can't figure out something swinging
strikes.
Called plus swinging strikes.
It's just, it's a general indicator of how many strikes he's done.
Okay, so you like Joe Ryan, and do you have any interest in Baltimore on the other side?
Not really, given that underperformance. This is a team that in the early part of the season, I was inclined to go to when they were facing lefty pitching based on their numbers from last year. They haven't even come through in that regard, and they're an underperforming team in general against righties. If you're rostering an overwhelming amount of Joe Ryan, maybe you grab a few insurance stacks for tournament play, but I don't really see any overwhelming need to go here. If you're doing it, Cedric Mullins, Trey Mancini, Santander, Mountcastle, Hayes, that's probably my limit, the top 5. I don't think I need to get into anything. Maybe you grab Jorge Mateo if you're desperate for a low-cost back-end shortstop, wrap him around with all that speed, but it's not a priority stack.
Okay, sounds good. And then on the other side, Bruce Zimmerman so far has a 26.3% K rate this year, better than expected. He is, I believe, 6,100. I didn't write that on this sheet, but relatively cheap. Do you have any interest in Zimmerman going up against the Twins? And then do you have any interest in the Twins bats on the other side?
I basically have to say yes because he's in play on DK. 6,100 is an SP2. We've got him as a 7.1% probability of being a top 2, and he's only owned 1.7% of the time. So there is value in a low-owned, very cheap starting pitcher on that site. I wouldn't touch him at 9,500 somehow on the FanDuel slate. And Bruce Zimmerman is not a good pitcher. He is not this guy who's putting up a 26.3% strikeout rate. He is much more the guy who had a 19.6% strikeout rate over 64 and a third last year with a 4.44 xFIP, a 151 whip. The walk rate was okay, but he was allowing a tremendous amount of hard contact, 44.4% hard hit rate, a 9.8% barrel rate last year. And that's come through this year, even with the quality that he's shown. Still a 41.5% hard hit rate, 92.4 miles an hour average exit velocity, 7.5% barrel rate. Every indication says this pitcher is going to get got at some point, and it's going to come soon. I don't dislike the opportunity for the fairly heavily right-handed, powerful Twins lineup here to be one of the teams that could potentially do it to him. So I'm much more inclined to go toward Twin stacks than Zimmerman, but I do get it on DK for some minimal value shares.
Okay. Yep. Just interesting because of the price tag. Not really a whole lot of appeal otherwise on Zimmerman. All right. Anything else to say about this game before we move on?
Just to call out those Twin stacks, they're getting a little bit of ownership at the top end, particularly on FanDuel. They're pretty cheap. But Byron Buxton can be in my lineup any day of the week. Carlos Correa is pretty much of that caliber as well. It goes into Jorge Polanco, who I do like. Gio Urshela cleaning up, I don't love, but he's a righty bat. He can hit one out of the park. On the back end, Gary Sanchez, definitely interesting where you need a catcher, all that righty power. I know people have their issues with his swing and miss and all of that, but Gary does still have a tremendous amount of pop. Max Kepler, even lefty. I don't think this lefty is going to be in for that long, and he doesn't suffer that much there. So I'm good going, down at least to the 7 spot in this lineup. It's a weird 2-catcher configuration, and Gio Urshela cleaning up with 2 third basemen also in the lineup on DK. So it just comes together in strange ways. I think maybe you benefit a little in the ownership column just because of how it comes together in strange ways over there. And they're going to be a little bit even lighter on than maybe we've got them projected for, because I don't know how well we account for something like that, just the anomaly of how that lineup's constructed today. So I think they're somewhat interesting going up against what I do think is a lefty that gives up a ton of contact, a ton of exit velocity. He's a guy who's going to yield some home runs. It's just a matter of, do they get out of this reconfigured park, and is it the right night to go after him?
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Yankees going up against Toronto. Yankees with a 3.9 implied run total. Toronto 4.1. We've got Jameson Taillon going against Alek Manoah. Let's start off with Taillon. Do you have any interest in Jameson Taillon going up against the Blue Jays, or then the Blue Jays on the other side of the game?
It would be a few minor leverage shares, maybe, just because he's not at all owned. 0.5% on both sites, 7,900 on DK, 75 on FanDuel. Not one of our higher rated pitchers when I was looking at him earlier in the afternoon. Yeah, still bottom third of the list by probability of success. Where it comes in is in the top, let's call it 7 pitchers. Those guys are all above 10%, probable of being a top 2 starter on DK. And then there's a plateau from, the high single digits at 9.3 down to Ryan Yarbrough at 6.1%, who stands 5th from the bottom. And he's in that group. So it's kind of a broad plateau, and nobody's going to be on him. He is a capable pitcher. He could pitch through this lineup clean. The issue is they don't strike out a ton. There's a tremendous amount of power. There's a tremendous amount of sequential hitting capability, the ability to get on base via the walk in this lineup. So I just don't love the spot. Maybe a few shares just for cheap to differentiate from some of my other value pitchers, but not a target for me.
Okay. Will you be targeting the Blue Jays bats then? If you don't love Taillon, but you say he's a capable pitcher. The Blue Jays obviously are a capable team. Any interest in the Blue Jays bats in this one?
Yeah, I tell you what, just for the fact that we're getting one of the best lineups in baseball with essentially single digit ownership and low single digit ownership for most of these guys, that's a situation, Yankees, Blue Jays, Astros, White Sox, a couple of Dodgers, a couple teams like that. These elite teams, when they're so low owned, I really don't care who the pitcher is. I'm just going to go there. I'm just going to have some stacks. So yeah, even going up against my team's pitcher here, I definitely want to be a part of it. Taillon is certainly not invulnerable. He was good for contact so far this year, 32.8% hard hit, 6.6% barrel. Just last year, though, in his renaissance, 40.2% hard hit, 8.2% barrels, ton of launch angles. So he's a guy who gives up the home run. I'm happy to get to some stacks: Springer, Bichette, Vlad, Lourdes Gurriel, Matt Chapman. You can play Raimel Tapia. I don't love him. Zach Collins definitely is a catcher option where required.
Okay. And then on the other side of the game, we've got Alek Manoah going up against your Yankees. Are you going to be playing any Manoah, and then are you going to be playing any Yankees bats on the other side?
Good news, yeah, Yankees haters, I will not be heavily pitching the Yankees stack today. It's been featured so many times in my articles recently. We keep talking about them on shows. I do think they're interesting by virtue of that same thing I said about the Blue Jays. We've got a 0.5% ownership on every single player in the Yankees lineup on both sites, essentially. Joey Gallo is pulling a little bit higher ownership on FanDuel for some reason. He's the only guy over 1%. So get to some Yankee stacks just because there won't be a lot of people there, and they're an excellent lineup. Alek Manoah is a very good pitcher, 25.8% strikeout rate over 25 innings so far this season. He's been excellent at limiting quality contact, a 3.1% barrel rate, a 31.3% hard hit rate so far this year. Just keeps the ball in the yard really well and has that strikeout ability, 13.6% swinging strike rate. He can sit down a lot of these Yankees. So I like the chances for him to put up a decent fantasy score here. I will have some Manoah shares. Probably at or around the field, 9,700 on DK for 11%. Let me see where he lands on the board here in terms of our leverage. Yeah, you know what? With the positive leverage, 15.8% probability of being a top 2 on DK, I think I'd look to get over the field. 11% ownership is probably too low for the strikeout upside here. So I think I would look to push that, get up toward 20% on Manoah on DK maybe. On the FanDuel slate, looking at where Alex has him on the same board, Similar situation, yeah. Half as owned as he is likely to be a top starter. I like him a little bit better in the DK situation just because of the price. 10-4 on FanDuel is getting a little bit aggressive, but yeah, I'll have some shares.
Okay, so you're going to be playing some Manoah. Does the same? You said that you have some interest in the Blue Jays when they're going to be low owned. What about the Yankees? The Yankees are also coming in at 0.6% ownership on the stack. Do you have interest in full stack in the Yankees or just going to one-offs?
Yeah, I'm happy to take whatever one-offs here. I definitely would go to some full stacks, though. I just think, based on that same principle of one of the best lineups in baseball, teams won 10 straight games. They're pretty good. They're at fair prices. They're at no ownership. Yeah, you're going up against a high strikeout pitcher who's likely to put some holes in this lineup and sit a lot of these guys down. 31.3% hard hit, like I mentioned this year, 31.2% overall all of last year. So he's very good at limiting hard contact. These are elite contact hitters, though. So yeah, these guys can still put a move on the ball even against this pitcher. So at that ownership, happy to go to some Yankee stacks, but not aggressively selling them. Not the priority stack that they've been in recent days.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you started with that, so I just asked you to repeat the same thing.
Yeah, no worries.
Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well. Just I do like the low ownership on both sides on the hitting. You gotta like that when you're looking at the names. Take the pitchers out of the equation and just the names on in both lineups. So definitely an interesting leverage spot and potentially an inflection point for the slate too.
All right, we've got Angels at Boston coming up. Before we get there, let me tell you about the promo code Luca offer that we have going on. To start May off right, we have launched one of our best offers of the year for new Awesemo Plus users. Get $7 for a full 7 days of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That's just over 75% off when you use promo code Luca. That's LUKA for all you non-basketball fans at checkout, or simply just click the link in the video description below to claim your 7 for 7 right now. This will give you access to everything we have to offer for every DFS sport, including player projections, ownership projections, our NBA boom bust tool, lineup builders, and so much more. With NBA winding down, if you're looking to get started with MLB DFS, then this is a great opportunity to take advantage. We also have our all new F1 projections, USFL, tennis, soccer, almost any DFS sport out there. We have some tools for it to help give you that edge. That's $7 for 7 days of Awesemo Plus Platinum with promo code Luca, or just click that link below to activate. Again, this offer is for new Awesemo Plus users only. Please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and can be easily added with these packages at checkout, but is not included in our base packages, nor are the high-stakes NBA DFS ownership projections for the playoffs, which were recently released. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. That was a long promo read. I can see why. I believe Greg skipped that one on our earlier. He was like, I'm not reading this whole thing. Yeah, that's a long one. All right, we'll move on. We got Angels.
That's where I get away with saying, yeah, I'm just making it my own. I'm shaping it like I want to make it sound good. No, I
probably should have done that. That was a lot.
Just hit the highlights.
Yeah, I should have hit the highlights. All right, we got the Angels at the Red Sox. Angels with 4.8 run implied total. Boston Red Sox 4.3. We've got Noah Syndergaard on the mound for the Angels, and then Michael Wacha on the mound for Boston. Let's start with Syndergaard. Do you have any interest in Noah Syndergaard, or do you have any interest in the Boston bats coming back?
I tell you what, I didn't really have much interest in Thor earlier in the day. Looking at just the price at what he's done so far this season, it looks like he's climbing up Alex's board a little bit. He doesn't project out that great for me, but in terms of our top pitchers tool, he's gone from the lower middle to like the upper middle now. He's ranked, looks like seventh or so, 5.1% probability of being the top starter on FanDuel. And what you got to love is 0.5% ownership. That's intriguing for a guy who used to strike out, 27, 28% of hitters. This year so far, 16.4%, not nearly that guy, but he's pretty likely to pitch through clean, even against a powerful Red Sox lineup. He's just not a guy who's given up home runs in his career. So he's got everybody's power in my home run model suppressed, even for the, the Rafael Deverses of the world, the JD Martinez's of the world. So as far as a pitcher who could give you a clean start, maybe it's a little bit of a lower ceiling than some of the other guys, but if those guys go pop, Thor could give you a clean enough start over, 6 innings or so that maybe he does hit the win bonus. Maybe he does get you there. I don't hate it, given all that leverage, given the fact that nobody else is there. So just trusting on our top pitchers tool on that one. It's not necessarily carrying through my model, but trusting in the top pitchers tool, I think we can grab a few additional shares. I'll probably have a little bit more than I expected to starting out the night.
Okay, so do you think that there's any chance that strikeout upside comes back? You think that he still has upside for 7 strikeouts in a game?
It's definitely possible. I mean, he is a guy who he was never the upper echelon that we see these days where guys are pitching into the 35s or like a guy like Rodon is currently at 42 in a small sample, but guys were, in the 35s last season. Syndergaard topped out, I think, at 29% at the highest point of his career, which is still very, very good. Could he come back as a 24% guy somewhere around there? That's about what I expect. So yeah, I think it'll rise from the 16.4% that we've got right now. There are certainly some strikeout spots in this Red Sox lineup. Top couple hitters are in the 20s. You get a guy like Frenchie Cordero was 37.5% last season. So definitely a lot of strikeouts available there. There are a few guys like Bogarts, like Alex Verdugo, who do very well limiting strikeouts, but I think you could find a few. But it's more likely that I think he has just a clean game, a clean low scoring game, not a lot of damage, and comes in, maybe the 4-5 strikeout range, then that 7 strikeout upside. That would be a ceiling game, I think, from him at this point.
Okay. Yeah. I ran a 500 lineup dummy crunch just to kind of see if I would get any, and I got 1% Noah Syndergaard. So maybe if you want to get some Noah Syndergaard and you're using Fantasy Crunch, you probably need to give him a thumbs up or maybe give a tiny boost to his projection if you want to get just a little bit more, which it makes sense based on the top pitchers tool. If you believe he has any kind of upside, makes some sense. You said that you don't expect him to get to give up any home runs or many home runs. Does that limit your interest in the Boston Bats?
A little bit. It's just that he's limiting the power upside. So in a year where we're already seeing a lot of power limitations and the dead ball and all these different factors, throw in a guy who has historically been good at limiting home runs and sapping power. I just feel like there's maybe better spots. That said, I'll probably let some Red Sox stacks in around the edges just on the notion of maybe he's, a little bit limited in terms of the depth that he's going to pitch to still. He's still only given us 17 innings over 3 starts coming back from the extended absence, the surgery and all of that. So maybe you get into this pen a little bit early. It's still a very premium lineup for the Red Sox. They're owned a little bit more than like the Yankees or the Blue Jays were, though. They're in the, the mid single digits versus like the 0.5% that we saw on the Yankees, a little bit higher even on the FanDuel side of things. So I'd probably come in at or beneath the field. I'm not really excited, not really targeting the spot, but there's plenty of quality, at least through the top 5 there.
Okay, that makes sense. And then on the other side of the game, do you have any interest in Michael Wacha going up against the Angels?
No, not really. Wacha's not a pitcher that I really get excited about rostering. 8,200 on DK, 87. He's kind of an also ran, doesn't project well in my model. Low strikeout guy, 21.3% so far this season, 22.9% last season. Puts too many guys on base. Typically, he was a 1.31 whip last year. This year, he's at a 0.93 somehow, but he's walked 11.3%, which is nearly double the walks that he gave up last year. Not throwing any strikes, 23.4% CSW. So I just don't really like Wacha. I don't really believe very much. I'm more inclined to go towards some Angels bats. The obvious names are a little bit popular, but they immediately fall off the table in terms of ownership around guys like Anthony Rendon, Jared Walsh, who I liked for a home run tonight. The back end is a little bit uninspiring with the Jack Mayfield, Stassi, Fletcher, Velasquez configuration here, but up through the top 5, it's a pretty compelling lineup, decent power metrics. So I can stack that part of the lineup and leave out the back end here and take some shares of that, I think.
All right, I like it. Calling your shot with Jared Walsh. We don't get a lot of shot calls here. I used to enjoy the team used to do like home run picks and stuff. I guess sometimes when I'm on the show with Eric, we do dong picks, but we haven't been doing it. Maybe we'll have to start incorporating those into our shows.
I'd be all for it. I still put mine in my article every day. I'm pretty sure it was Jared Walsh today. I might have changed it at the last second, but I think that's who I went with. But I do like the spot either way.
I like it. I like the confidence.
Somebody out there in chat can confirm that.
Anything else from this game before we move on?
No, Taylor Ward is low owned because he's 5,400 at the top of the lineup on the DK slate. Don't sleep on him. If you're building Angel stacks on DK, don't leave him out. You figure out a way to pay that 5,400. 390, 493, 746 with a 356 ISO 5 home run so far this season. Creating runs 161% better than average over his 71 plate appearances. He is a strong individual player and a strong correlation play with the rest of that lineup. So do not leave him out just because he's expensive and you don't necessarily know who he is.
Okay, I like it. All right, we got the Reds going up against the Brewers up next. Reds with a 3.1 implied team total. Brewers 4.5. We got Tyler Mahle on the mound going up against Brandon Woodruff. I brought this up this morning with Greg that you have a few times gone kind of against the top pitchers tool, where the top pitchers tool shows a pitcher being over-owned, and you say, I don't really care about that. I said that you may have done that with Brandon Woodruff. Maybe it was Corbin Burns both times. I know it was twice. Two weeks in a row, you liked some Brewers pitcher more than the top pitchers tool would suggest. I don't remember if it was only Corbin Burns, but I actually want to start there. So we usually, since we already brought it up, we usually start with the other side first, but the home team first. But Brandon Woodruff, is he a pitcher that you are okay getting close to the field with? He's coming in on the top pitchers tool, 43.1% ownership, top two pitcher 21.3% of the time. Is this something that you're factoring in, or that's on DraftKings? Are you is that ownership too much on DraftKings, or is this a spot where you're okay with that ownership?
Pitcher of this caliber against the lineup that has been performing this poorly in general, I'm happy to get, even when they're that heavily owned, I'm happy to get pretty heavily invested. I do think, one of the times we talked about was definitely Burns. Another time I think was Carlos Rodon, who's also on this slate. And the difference in that one, I was saying, yeah, I want to get overweight to Rodon in particular, was that he was standing just head and shoulders above everybody else on that slate. Where the difference today is I do think we've got other strong, viable options, guys that project out well, like Rodon himself, despite a tough matchup against the Dodgers, is certainly capable of putting up and matching whatever Woodruff does here. It's just the thing working really strongly in Woodruff's favor is the quality of the matchup. The Reds are 29th in baseball against right-handed pitching, creating runs 29% worse than average. They have a 1.88% home run rate so far this season. That sits 23rd in baseball, striking out at a 23.1% clip in the split. There's a lot of upside on a guy who is a very, very good pitcher in general. 29.8% strikeout rate last season for Woodruff, a 3.05 xFIP, a 0.96 whip, induced a 12.9% swinging strike rate. All those metrics are still right there this season. He was excellent at limiting hard contact, 32.4% hard hit rate with a 5.8% barrel last year. This year, 5.6% barrel, 35.2% hard hit. There's nothing not to like about Woodruff here. And I think the prices are aggressively low enough in this situation that you can justify getting to that public ownership. Even if you're above it, I don't really have an issue with it again. I just think it's that good a spot. The DFS situation in terms of somebody else potentially outscoring him is a little bit different. You could get that game from Julio Urias could come out and put up a strong game against the Giants. You could get that game from Manoah going up against the Yankees, racking up a ton of strikeouts. I just think you're getting so much probability from Woodruff here that it does justify it if you want to go there. I don't think you have to, like I was kind of suggesting in that Rodon game, but I think it's justifiable to.
Okay, so it's not quite the same situation. All right. That's totally fine. I just wanted to hear because I thought you provide an interesting perspective sometimes on these things, because I focus maybe too much sometimes on the top pitches tool, and maybe sometimes you can help me find some of those outliers where I can go overweight to a player and not worry as much about the top two odds. If the top three odds are high enough, I'm okay with that as well. So just want to hear your perspective on that. So because of your interest in Woodruff and the Reds not being a great offense, do you have any interest in the Reds on the other side of the game?
No, I can't really imagine a scenario where I'm getting to Reds. This is not the situation where, they're all owned 0.5% of the time, but this is not the quality of the Yankees or any of those other teams that I listed off. So not against this pitcher, not with this team. No.
Okay, that makes sense. Now we're going reverse order. Now we'll go to the home team, the home pitcher. The home
road
pitcher. Yes. Road pitcher. Home batters. Yes. I'm all out of sorts here. Yes. Okay. I also had to get up early to do the morning show this morning. So I'm just, today is rough for me. You gotta forgive me.
It's a long haul.
Yeah, exactly. We got Tyler Mahle at Milwaukee. Tyler Mahle, I was saying on the morning show, looks pretty good to me in the top pitchers tool. I believe he's still looking like a pretty solid option, coming in at only 5.4% projected ownership on DraftKings at 6,900. I have some interest there. Do you have any interest in Tyler Mahle or the Milwaukee Bats on the other side?
I do have interest in Mahle. I think he's an interesting little leverage spot. When I was listing off the top 7 guys on that DK slate that are all in double digits, he's the first guy, the next guy after that tier, sitting at 9.3% probable of being a top 2, and only pulling in around half that in terms of the ownership. He has struggled out of the gate this year a little bit, only a 23.5% strikeout rate, walking the world at 10.8% and a 1.66 whip. Ouch, those are ugly. Still a 3.98 xFIP under the cover, so reasonably, pitching reasonably well in terms of some of the contact, 11.6% swinging strike rate. Needs to just throw more called strikes and get back in the zone and work a little bit more effectively. Last year, he had a 27.7% strikeout rate with an 8.4% walk rate. The whip was down at 1.23. The swinging strikes were about the same, but the CSW was 29.3 versus the 28.7. So just working a little bit more in the zone made him a more effective pitcher. He had a 3.74 xFIP. He's very good at limiting hard contact, 33.9% hard hit last year, 31.3% this year. Currently sitting at a 0.0, a perfect Dean Wormer for the barrel rate for the season so far this year. So has not allowed a barreled ball yet this year, which is very interesting. That speaks to some of the quality in his ability to miss the fat part of the bat, so to speak, and miss the ideal launch angle and exit velocity that you need to reach the barrel mark. So I do like the quality. 6,900. He's way too cheap on DK for his overall talent and upside against the lineup that does have plenty of strikeouts in it. So I like the spot on DK a lot. 5.4% is not owned enough. That's a great value spot. Even on FanDuel, 7,500. He ranks a few spots down the board, single digit probability of being a top starter, but everybody's single digit probability of being the top starter on FanDuel. He's owned he's owned at 2.8%, half his probability. I'm happy to go there and take out some shares. And I'll probably get to some Brewers bats on the other side of it, just in case he puts too many guys on via the free pass. And then one of these guys like a Rowdy Tellez hits one out.
Okay. Makes sense. Anything else from this game before we move on?
No. Well, don't stack Reds. If you are going to the Brewers, Colton Wong's fine off the top. Willie Adames, Christian Yelich, Andrew McCutchen, all very solid. Rowdy Tellez for some lefty power. And Hunter Renfroe can hit a home run off of anybody. The back three, not necessarily great. So stick to the top six if you're stacking Brewers. Don't go haywire with it. It's not a great spot, but I would grab some insurance against Mahle if I'm rostering. And I think I would be over the field on Mahle shares.
Okay, right on. All right, let's move on to the Chicago series. We got White Sox at Cubs. White Sox with a 3.9 implied run total, Cubs 3.3. We've got Michael Kopech on the mound going up against Drew Smyly. Let's start with Kopech. Let's start with the weather. So you mentioned earlier that this is we do have some concerns about the weather here. Last I checked, we have winds blowing in on Wrigley Field, so that's going to suppress some hard hits here. Probably helps the pitching, I would think. With that in mind, do you have any interest in Michael Kopech going up against the Cubs, or the Cubs on the other side coming back?
So I do think we're going to get some limitations in terms of the power upside for this game, particularly on the Cubs side of things, between Kopech and his ability to strike these guys out, and just that weather factor, that wind blowing in, ridiculously hard toward home plate, definitely going to have a suppressing factor on the home run upside for some of these hitters. It doesn't necessarily come through in my home run model. It doesn't do a great job of capturing something like a 20-mile-an-hour wind gust or a 25-mile-an-hour wind gust. So on the White Sox side, I'm still pulling some decent home run marks on a few of these hitters, not all of them, but on the higher end guys. On the Cubs side, everybody's pretty suppressed here. Michael Kopech, very, very good with the strikeouts, has allowed some hard hit this year at 40%, but it's only in 19 innings. Last year in 69 and a third, largely out of the bullpen, he only made 4 starts, but he was still at a 33.8% hard hit rate last year. So he was good at limiting the hard hit. I think that'll shine through. That's what's coming through in my model. So I expect him to suppress the Cubs and probably to rack up some strikeouts. What I don't love is he's at the right price. He's not at a discount. 9,300, 9,200 is arguably a little bit cheap, but it's around the right price, and he's around the right popularity. He's significantly more popular than his probability marks on our board, but it's appropriate ownership for this pitcher in this matchup, just for the field to be at. So based on the negative leverage, I don't love going to a rookie starter or, a nominal second-year starter. And I'll throw in the fact that, a 20-mile-an-hour wind gust behind the pitcher can certainly suppress the power going out the other way, but you can't tell me that doesn't necessarily have an impact on his delivery of the ball to home plate as well. Right. So there might be some kind of limiting factor where just his lack of experience pitching in that condition could maybe have a bit of an impact here. So with that in mind, as like a little last straw that broke the camel's back, I'd probably look to be under the field on Kopech. I do really like the strikeout upside. I do think he gives us a good start, but comparative to some of the other options on the board, I'm less excited than the field about him.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. And the top pitchers tool, I assume, does not totally factor in wind and all these considerations either. And even just based on the top pitchers tool, he looks like he's over-owned, coming in at 32.3% ownership with an 18.9% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. So I like that. That's good reasoning to maybe not go all in on Kopech despite the winds blowing and suppressing the bats for the Cubs. What about so Greg suggested on the morning show that he might full fade all the batters in this game because of the weather, because there it limits the home run upside. He brought up the idea of just full fading all batters, both from the Cubs and the White Sox. I was saying, I mean, based on the top stacks tool, the White Sox look pretty good. So I'm a little bit hesitant. They're coming in at 1.5% ownership on the stack, 4.3% top stack odds. So I'm hesitant to fully fade the White Sox. What do you think of the idea of fading the White Sox? Do you think you're going to be getting to any full stacks of the White Sox, or are you going to allow yourself to have some one-offs?
Yeah, I'm going to probably I'm just looking at some of the pricing here, and I think that's going to lead me into some of these White Sox stacks, to be honest. The weather concern is definitely real with it. Anytime you're getting wind gusts like that blowing in, it's definitely going to have a limiting impact on power. You do also have to time it, right? I mean, if it's gusting, there are definitely dead spots where if a guy like Luis Robert happens to make contact in one of those dead spots, he's got a pretty good chance of hitting one out against a pitcher like Drew Smyly. So based on that, based on the right-handed quality at the top of this lineup from Tim Anderson, Luis Robert, AJ Pollock, Jose Abreu, Yasmani Grandal, you could even get down into the Jake Burgers of the world down toward the bottom end. Adam Engel and Lurie Garcia and Josh Harrison are fine contact hitters. They're not necessarily useful in this scenario, but through the top 5, top 6, I think you can stack together some of these White Sox bats. They're all very low owned, and I really like how they're priced on both sites. Everybody below 5,000 on DK, everybody 3,600 or below, and aggressively below on most of these guys on FanDuel. AJ Pollock 2,600 on FanDuel, hitting third in my projected lineup that I'm looking at here, I got to say. So very low pricing on some of these guys would probably lead me towards some White Sox bats despite the weather considerations. Let me see if I've got some confirmed lineups I can update.
Okay, then we also talked about Kopech. Maybe the wind it'll help suppress some hard hit balls, but it also might kind of throw him off his game a little bit. Do you have any concerns about Drew Smyly, or is he somebody that you think you're going to get to in this game as well?
I don't really have similar concerns about Drew Smyly in terms of that, but I just don't think I'd be rostering very much Drew Smyly. Low strikeout pitcher, guy who pitches to a fair amount of contact. 38.6% hard hit with a 10.1% barrel rate last year is what's leading to some of those power marks. 21.4% strikeouts for the lefty, over 126 and 2/3 last season. This year so far in 19 and a third, he's down at 16.7% strikeouts. Not putting many guys on base. The swinging strikes are actually interesting at 13.4% for that low a strikeout rate. That's weird. But I think there's just some happenstance baked in here. I don't think all that much of Drew Smyly at this point. So I don't need him in this spot. I don't think it's even at 1.9% ownership, 8,600 is probably the wrong price for him on DK.
Okay. And did you get that information on the White Sox bats that you were trying to find? Do you think you have?
They haven't confirmed the lineup yet.
They haven't confirmed the lineup. That's what. Okay. Anything else you want to say about this game before we move on?
No, I think we can move on from this one. If anything pops up with if either team confirms lineups, we can swing back.
All right. Well, before we move on to the next game, let me tell you about our Best Bets package. Now is the time to check out our Best Bets package. Click the link below to subscribe, as our team of experts use Awesemo's industry-leading projection models to identify the best bets available in the NBA, MLB, and more each day. We are confident these bets will be worth more than the price of admission, so click that link below and start betting today. If you want a free preview of our best bets, follow our @Awesemo Best Bets Twitter handle and turn on notifications, as we will be posting one free premium bet every day. Now also seems like a good time to remind you to please hit that like button on the YouTube video. All right, Terry, let's move on to the Cardinals.
Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut off your transition there. As you were doing the plug, the White Sox dropped their lineup, and no Luis Robert in the lineup. Definitely changes the nature of this thing. Timmy Anderson, AJ Pollock, Yasmani Grandal, Jose Abreu into Gavin Sheets, Adam Engel, Jake Burger. I don't mind the 5, 6, 7 that they came up with there, but I hate it without Luis Robert in there. So less inclined to go to the White Sox. They still look okay through that top 6, top 7, but I'm less inclined without that star outfielder in there. So takes a minor ding and makes them a little bit less appealing.
Okay. Chat also pointed out that Drew Smyly was scratched today.
He was.
I am still seeing him in the top pitcher school, but we must have gotten a notification that I.
Yep. Looks like someone named Scott Efros.
Okay.
Not really inclined to go toward him. I can see if I can get any info on him real quick.
And Padres Guardians postponed Tuesday due to rain. I don't believe they were on this slate anyway. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, so they were not on this slate anyway, so we don't need to concern ourselves with that. So you're going to look up this.
Looks like it'll be a bullpen game for the Cubs now. This guy Efros that's listed as the starter, 10 innings this year, but no starts. 14 and 2/3 last year, no starts. 30 and change % strikeout rate is great, but he's probably only going to be in there for an inning or two. So I don't think he's overly viable. He's 4,000 on the DK slate, but I can't imagine we're expecting innings. I don't know enough to say, so I don't want to push too hard either way, but I wouldn't expect him to get too many innings here.
Okay. And does that change your interest in the White Sox bats if we are facing a bullpen game?
It might push it back a little bit the other way, in terms of, taking Rivera out is definitely a hit, but now we're going up against a shaky bullpen. Maybe it pushes it a little bit back the other way. But like I said, if you're getting that guy in a 30% strikeout rate off the top for 2 innings, taking the bats out of the hands of a weaker version of the top of this lineup, I don't love it. So maybe I'm around the field, maybe a few additional shares than the field, but I'm definitely my desire to stack this team was definitely hampered by no Luis Rivera in the lineup.
Yeah, maybe Greg got it right. Maybe we just full fade the Chicago bats. Yeah, right.
He's smart.
He's a smart guy.
I took 10 minutes to get to where he just said, "Nah, it's windy. I don't want to go there."
Yeah, exactly.
That was probably the better approach.
Cut to the chase. All right. So getting back to my great transition, we have the Cardinals at the Kansas City Royals. Dakota Hudson versus Brad Keller on the mound. The Cardinals with a 4.1 run implied total. Royals with a 3.8 run implied total. Let's start with Dakota Hudson. Any interest there, and then any interest in the Kansas City Royals coming back?
Tempered interest in the Royals, maybe just because I don't think all that much of Dak Hudson here. He ranks in the bottom third of our probability boards. Taking a look on the DK slate, 6.3% probability of being a top 2. He's only owned 0.5% of the time by the field, so you can get there. He's 8,100 though. This is a situation where he should be priced in the 6,000s. I think. I just don't think that much of him is a starter. 18.2% strikeout rate over 19 and 2/3 so far this season, walking 11.7, 44.2% hard hit so far this season, 9.6% barrel rate. That speaks like a Sal Perez home run to me more than it speaks like upside for the pitcher. It's not a very powerful lineup. They get by on sequential hitting. They get by on speed. You've got a masher in the 3 spot in Sal Perez. You can get a little bit of power out of Carlos Santana on the right day. Then you've got Merrifield, Edward Olivares, Andrew Benintendi, Bobby Witt. All these guys are hit tool and speed oriented. So maybe they sequentially hit this guy to death. I don't really love the spot for the stack. I don't really need any shares of the pitcher.
Okay, makes sense. Just a cross off spot there with Dakota Hudson and the Royals stack. Okay, on the other side, do you have any interest in Brad Keller going up against the Cardinals and the Cardinals on the other side coming back?
I do not have interest in Brad Keller going up against the Cardinals. He has been interesting, I guess, so far this year, but none of it is real, I don't think. So I expect that he's going to regress in the ratio stats. The strikeout rate is already still as low as it was last year, 18.9%. Last year it was 19.6%. He's cut his walks this year. His whip is low. The swinging strikes are low. There's not much to see there for Brad Keller. I wrote about the Cardinals today. They've struggled pretty significantly against right-handed pitching so far this season because they're a really, really heavily right-handed lineup. But I still think this is a good spot for this Cardinals team. And they're another squad that is loaded with talent and coming in at 1% owned, 0.5% owned, et cetera, et cetera. So just looking for leverage opportunities, going up against the guy I think is a bad pitcher. I am happy to grab shares of Tommy Edman, Paul Goldschmidt, Tyler O'Neill, Nolan Arenado off the top. And I can mix in Albert Pujols. I can mix in some Bader, some Dylan Carlson as a switch hitter from the very, very bottom of the lineup. If you're willing to take some shots on, very limited power upside, maybe some shares of Paul DeYoung as a shortstop. But he's just kind of keeping that seat warm for Nolan Gorman right now. Have you seen, are you aware of this Gorman kid for St. Louis?
I'm aware of him in the sense that I wanted to draft him for my dynasty team and couldn't, and then
that would have been a good
somebody else got him, and yeah, it's an NL only league team too, so it's gonna be. But I don't know much about him. He's looking good.
Filthy good. Yeah. That would have been filthy for an NL only. He's got 11 home runs and 400 something ISO so far in 88 plate appearances this year in AAA. So Paul DeJong is very much keeping that seat warm for him until they decide to call him up. And then this lineup takes another leap forward. But for right now, small shares of Paul DeJong, particularly at 2,100 on FanDuel, you might get the oddball home run out of him.
Yeah, I wanted him before he was like as highly ranked as he is now, because his card market was heating up. He was his baseball cards were selling really well, and so I was like,
usually a good indicator.
Somebody knows something that aren't reflected in these rankings. So I had interest and then missed out. Somebody else apparently saw the same thing, so that was a huge bummer for me. All right,
in my dynasty league, he was only drafted like 4 years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, me too. This is a couple years ago at least. Did I mischaracterize what you said about the Kansas City Royals bats? You said that you had some interest maybe in Sal Perez, looked okay here, but I think you said you don't have a ton of interest in general in the Royals bats. I just want to make sure I didn't mischaracterize when I said you're crossing it off.
Yeah, that's accurate. They wouldn't be a full cross off if a few shares sneaking around the middle, particularly around the top 6 hitters in that lineup. I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't rush to take them out, but they're definitely not a priority target for me. Okay. Sal would definitely be my favorite bet. He's more interesting to me on FanDuel for 3,100, where you don't need the catcher position, so nobody tends to roster him despite his ridiculous power. 4,500 on DK. He's pulling 7.2% ownership as like the lone highly owned outlier in that lineup. That's still low enough that you can one-off him as a catcher. It's totally fine. I just think he's more sneaky at that 3,100 price. That's really cheap, and he's low on the FanDuel slate. So Sal Perez is a one-off, minor interest in Royal stacks, but not a priority.
Okay, but you like the Cardinals bats, the stack more than the Royal stack.
Indeed. Yep. Okay. Very much so. Right. Again, top 6 hitters primarily, but you can go 1 through 9 in that lineup if you had to.
Yep. Anything else from this game that you want to talk about before we move on?
No, I think we're good.
All right, we've got a relatively high scoring Seattle at Houston coming in with a 9-run total. Seattle coming in at 4.2 run implied team total. Astros at 4.9. We've got Chris Flexen on the mound for Seattle and Christian Javier on the mound for Houston. Let's start with the Flexen side going up against the Houston bats. Do you have any interest in Flexen or the Houston bats coming back?
Houston, I'll always have some interest in. They're fairly low owned on the FanDuel slate outside of Jose Altuve at the top of the lineup. So yeah, I would get to some Houston stacks based on the ownership, based on the low for them pricing on both sites. Definitely interesting going up against kind of a nothing pitcher in Flexen. 15.6% strikeout rate so far this year, pitch to contact type of a guy against one of the best contact hitting low strikeout teams in baseball. I definitely think this is an interesting spot for the Astros. So I would be looking to attack some Astros stacks here, go after Chris Flexen. I wouldn't be rostering any shares of Chris Flexen. 6,400 maybe as a really low owned SP2 dart throw on if you want to get away from all the other better value options on DK. Maybe you take 1 or 2 shots, but it's not a good spot. This lineup is much more likely to get to him than he is to do any damage against them. So yeah, I wouldn't do it. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I was just asked who was my favorite contrarian stack on FanDuel, and just looking at it very briefly, I noticed the Astros kind of stuck out to me. I gave the Astros as my favorite stack on FanDuel for a large field GPP, just because they are the third highest top stack odds, but they are the top in terms of teams that actually have positive leverage. Actually, Colorado, am I on the right? I'm looking at DraftKings.
Yeah,
now.
No,
okay. Yeah. Good. So they look good just based on the top stacks duel on FanDuel, which I pay pretty close attention to. So for me, Houston would be my favorite stack on FanDuel, just because of the teams that have the highest leverage scores. They're the one that has kind of they stick out in terms of their actual top stack odds. So I have some interest in Houston.
They might be probability.
Yeah. They have a relatively high probability for teams that have pretty high leverage as well. So, if I'm just doing one single entry, I think Houston is probably the first team that I would put in there. Do you have, I was going to save this for the end of the show, but since I brought up mine, do you have a favorite stack for a single entry GPP on FanDuel?
That Houston call is a very good one. I wrote about both sides of this game in terms of the bats, just looking for leverage stacks in my tournament strategy article. So I actually like both sides of this one. There's only a little bit of leverage left on Seattle. They've gotten a little bit more popular since then. But actually the team that we just ran through, the St. Louis Cardinals, who I wrote up in my article today, is the featured stack, also pulling a nice little leverage score against the probability of being the top stack. The reason that Houston is probably more appealing, though, if you look at the probability of being the top stack, Houston doubles up that St. Louis mark. Houston's in the 8s. St. Louis is in the 4s. And the ownership, the ownership on St. Louis is a lot lower in terms of just the overall ownership share, but it's only a 5.6% for Houston. So it's not like we're talking about heavy ownership by any means. Comparatively, they're owned more, but in the actual individual numbers, you're talking about 4.5% on Brantley, 5.8% on Jordan Alvarez. The only guy really pulling aggressive ownership is Jose Altuve at 16.7%. He's skewing things atop the lineup. He only costs 3,000, which is too low for him. But yeah, I think there's every good reason in the world that the Astros are the right answer to that question. But for me, I'll throw in the Cardinals at half the probability.
Okay. Yep. That makes a lot of sense too. All right. We can get back on track. I just got off track because it happened to come up in that game as we were talking about it.
That's the interesting stuff. That's
the
stuff exactly. That's worth talking about.
Yeah.
Like I say, anybody can Google these stats on FanGraphs. Getting into the nitty gritty of how this stuff comes together and where the probabilities and where the ownership is what's important for everybody to hear out there.
Yep. Exactly. All right. I think the other side of this game is pretty interesting as well, because we've got Christian Javier, who I currently am getting a lot of on DraftKings. He's only 6,800 on DraftKings, so decent price for a pitcher going up against Seattle with some upside. I have some interest on DraftKings. Do you have any interest in Christian Javier? And then you mentioned that you have some interest in the Seattle stacks coming back, but tell me about the extent of your interest in the Seattle bats and your interest in Christian Javier, if you have any.
The Seattle interest is primarily based around the fact that I think it's a very good lineup. I like the way they go lefty righty, like throughout the lineup. It just comes together well with talent, basically 1 through 9. All 9 of those hitters are at least somewhat appealing for DFS purposes. You get a tremendous amount of power in a Tommy Murphy, even a Jared Kelenic, who struggled at the major league level, Julio Rodriguez, Abraham Toro, both, interesting young players, decent prospect pedigrees, and then a fairly proven top end. So I do like that lineup a lot. I think they're cheap on the FanDuel slate. They're at inflated prices on DK, but they're low owned on both sites for the most part. You're still pulling 15% ownership on $2,600 Jesse Winker. He was the same price and double the ownership yesterday. Granted, that was going against Jake Odorizzi, who had the last good start of his life last night. When I wrote about this team, he went out there and shut them out. I still can't explain that one, but yeah. But I'm going right back to the well with under-owned Mariners here. I do like the spot. They rank out well in the top stacks tool, and they've got some positive leverage. I think Christian Javier, good pitcher. He's a hybrid guy, goes back and forth between multi-inning appearances out of the bullpen and starts. He's been very, very good in both roles, 30+% strikeout rate in both roles. Tends to put guys on via the walk. Last year, 12.5% walk rate, over 101 in the third innings. 9 of those were starts. Some of that was out of the pen. This year, he's cut that down, 5.9% walk rate so far. Only made 1 start. The last time out, he hit 84 pitches in that outing. It was a 5-inning game, when struck out 4, walked 2. So he delivered a fairly high pitch count. Based on that, I expected decently full start here from him. So I think at the price, 6,800, he's an interesting SP2 option. The ownership's probably about appropriate at 12%, but if you wanted to push your SP2 shares beyond that, I don't think you're making a mistake necessarily with a kid who could go out and strike out a lot of Mariners hitters here.
Okay. Anything else that you want to say about this game before we move on and do the Awesemo Hall of Fame segment, which is an interesting one today?
You're gonna do it to me. Yeah, 3 out of 4 corners on this one. Leave Chris Flexen out of your plans, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. All right. Let's move on and let's do the Awesemo Hall of Fame. You can get into the Awesemo Hall of Fame by downloading the Awesemo profile avatar at awesemo.com/avatar. Tweet your wins at Awesemo Hall of Fame, and you can win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Just like some of the following people. Are you not actually on this list? I thought we had you on here. Okay, I'll out Terry. I don't actually see your screenshot listed, but Joe did win $30,000 on FanDuel on Friday. So congratulations to Terry for finally entering the Awesemo Hall of Fame. I think you are on here. You're just down lower. For some reason, it's not showing up on my screen right now. But you were on here previously, along with Steve DeColt's Buzzard. Anyway, I'll move back to the top of the list. John Harbison gives a shout out to the entire Awesemo crew for the daily grind they go through so we can end up on top at the end of the day. Can't wait to put good use that free month for taking down 2 tournaments tonight. He took down 2 NBA tournaments. It looks like it was a 3-entry max and a single entry, putting up 343.8 fantasy points in NBA playoffs. That is a pretty solid score, John. Way to go. Looks like 450 total for these 2 entries. Nice job, John. Also, congratulations to Sick Tracks the Juggernaut. He added Laffy and Ship My Money. He made the perfect lineup. He won $400 again in NBA Showdown. It looks like this is FanDuel. Way to go, Sick Tracks the Juggernaut. Next up, we have BK Many Numbers K. This looks like a bot. I don't believe BK is a real person, except I see that he has BK Napple with the Awesemo avatar. Won $10,000, putting up a score of 327 on DraftKings in the 40K jab step. Way to go, BK. I guess Brooklyn Apple. It's probably Brooklyn Apple, right? I don't know. He calls himself BK, but then it's BK Napple. I'm going to call him Brooklyn Apple 1. Way to go, Brooklyn Apple 1. If your last name is Napple, that's a cool nickname. So way to go, Brooklyn Apple. All right, Melissa. Now, this is definitely a bot. Her username on Twitter, her handle is @Melissa03807728. There's like, if I see this, I would just assume this is a bot. But again, it has to be a real person because she is winning money on DraftKings. She says, Mavs lost, but I don't give a damn. Awesome night. Many thanks to the gang at Awesemo, the Live Before Lock and Deeper Dive crew. She added those people, including yourself. Way to go, Terry. Winning an NBA Showdown, the quarter jukebox, and the 20K and 1 in the Dallas versus Pelicans series, it looks like. Won $302 one night, and then in another contest, won $150. Way to go, Melissa. Great
That's
scores.
the Melissa I think it is. I can vouch for the fact that she's real because she cleans EMAC out all the time in head-to-heads.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I am familiar with Melissa. And then finally, we've got Ryan Schindler, first big PGA hit. He thanked all of the Awesemo PGA guys, won $3,000. R Schindler 14 on DraftKings, taking second in a 20 max contest on DraftKings. Way to go, Ryan. I could have sworn that your screenshot was on here earlier. I don't know why I'm not seeing it now. Maybe this updated since I was looking at it earlier this morning, but that's all I've got on the Awesemo Hall of Fame today. Way to go, everybody, including
Everybody
Terry.
got sick of hearing about me.
Everybody got sick of hearing about
Let's
you, I
move
guess.
on.
All right, let's move on.
Lately, like I've been saying since Saturday.
Enough of Terry. Okay. All right. We'll move on. But way to go, everybody who made it into the Awesemo Hall of Fame, and everybody else. Get those avatars on there so you can get in as well. All right. Next up, we have the highest scoring game on the slate. We've got the Washington Nationals at the Colorado Rockies. Another Coors game. Eric Fetty on the mound for Washington against German Marquez. Let's start with Fetty. Do you have any interest in Eric Fetty? And on the other side, do you have any interest in the Rockies and their 6 implied team total?
I have no interest in Fede. I don't pitch him Nationals Park, for better or worse. He does provide the occasional spot start where he's fine and does, come through and strike out some guys, but just not the pitcher for me. 9.9% walk rate, who's on 5.3% of the time on FanDuel, 8.7% of the time on DK, and is not very much of a DFS play. Outside of that, it's just difficult to get to them. They're expensive. They're very, very popular. With expectations of being under the field, I will definitely have some Rockies, but I don't think I'm going to press anywhere near these individual ownership marks or the overall team ownership mark on Rockies.
Okay. I'm seeing people in the chat saying that they lost us and that we were lagging. So I'm just checking to see. I never lost you. I could hear you the whole time. I don't know. Maybe they were saying that while I was doing the Hall of Fame. Say, okay, Kickstart says that it's all good now. All right, we can continue on then. So you would have interest in the Rockies, but it's just hard to get there for you. Basically. Bats are okay. Yep.
Yeah, I expect they'll come through a lot in the optimizer, and then my sorting process is what's going to be eliminating them from the field. So if you're just running lineups out of Fantasy Cruncher, be wary of how many of these guys you're getting to and how many are going to be in that player pool. If you're doing like the old method of, I ran off these lineups and then I cut out the top X%, the bottom X% and ran those, you're still going to have an overwhelming amount of these guys in your lineup. So just be wary of the popularity.
Okay. Yeah. You just don't love the popularity, but they project well. So it's a matter of whether you just a game theory thing. You don't want to be playing the over-owned stack on a I guess now 10 game slate. All right. On the other side, do you have any interest in German Marquez going up against the Nationals? And do you have any interest in the Nationals and their 5.4 run implied team total?
I do. I teased this spot during the show that you were on this morning, and it is a still a spot for me. I'm going to be well above the field on German Marquez. I typically do that when he's going up against a bad team in a home start. I think he's a very, very good pitcher in general. He has the ability to pitch well in this ballpark. Over the course of his career, and I'm just referring to my article that's on the site, everybody can get an even more in-depth look at it. But over 4 starts so far this year, to clean up the bumpy part, 5.22 expected ERA, 5.57 ERA, has not been great. Has also been very limited in his strikeout rate this year, 14.7%. He hasn't made any changes to his pitch mix, to his velocity, anything like that that I could put my finger on. I think we're just dealing with some happenstance. The swinging strike rates are down significantly, but I think it's just a matter of he just hasn't made it happen. Not that he's lost any ability to make it happen, if that makes sense. He's a career 23.5% strikeout rate guy, which would probably be higher in other ballparks if he was making all of his starts at home and focusing on striking guys out. But overall, the course of his career, he has a I shouldn't be trying to read this out of here. Let me put it this way. Over the course of his career, he is very much the same pitcher in home starts as he is on the road. And he's been a good pitcher overall. He's got a 24% strikeout rate in home starts for the course of his career and a 3.43 xFIP for the course of his career. The ERA is inflated because it's Coors Field, and that happens to everybody because he allows, it's brutal on base hits. It's brutal on batting average on balls in play. So his batting average on balls in play in home starts is in like the 320s. It leads to a 4.73 ERA. But this is a guy who's very, very capable of putting up a strong start, striking out a lot of hitters in even in this ballpark. He's going up against a weak Nationals lineup. They've got 2 excellent hitters in Juan Soto and Nelson Cruz. Josh Bell is very good. Everybody else in this lineup is low end. They have some guys that are good at limiting strikeouts, but it's not a situation where I'm really worried about this team overall. And I think getting to a guy of Marquez's quality for 6,100 on FanDuel at no ownership is interesting to me because you can combine bats like you cannot do with any other pitcher. You can go to all premium bats from all premium stacks when you go to him and be reliably different from everybody else. 7,100 on DK. I think he's in play over there. Do not go completely haywire and put him in half your lineups across 150, but easily get over the field on German Marquez in this spot. I think it's a good opportunity to get completely different and for a very good price.
All right, I like that. That's the kind of analysis that we need from you. You are a man of the people. I wasn't in chat
of a Coors Field pitcher.
Right. I mean, I wasn't going to give that kind of ringing endorsement. And I wasn't in chatter, so I didn't see you giving your analysis in your chat. Otherwise, I probably would have incorporated it into my analysis of German Marquez. Cause I kind of said that I was like, yeah, he might be, maybe he reverts back to who he was and he's 7,100, but yeah, it's good to hear it from you. So I think that I will give him a little bit of a boost if I'm not getting to him naturally. That is really solid analysis. Well, the other side of the game, we've got Washington. You said that you have a tough time getting to the Rockies batters because they are too high owned. Washington is even worse on DraftKings. The stat coming in at 19.6% ownership. Do you think you're going to get to any Washington stacks going up against Marquez?
Probably not, because the guys who would offset any kind of ownership are guys that I don't really think that much of. Like I said, this is just a weak back end of this lineup. You can get away with the top 4 hitters, particularly in a Coors Field game. You could easily do that. They're all at cheap prices for who they are. Like Nelson Cruz in a Coors Field game for 3,700 in a vacuum, that's a great play, but he's pulling 21.5% ownership. Juan Soto for 4,800. Juan Soto, for one thing, should never be under 5,000 period, but definitely not at Coors Field. But 30% of the field's going to have them in their lineups. It's just difficult at that point. If I'm grabbing a few, one-off shares for the right price of a Soto, of a Nelson Cruz, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to go out of my way for national stacks here, though. It's just a situation where getting away from Coors, I think, makes more sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. We still got 2 games left, and we have 3 minutes or 8 minutes to do it. I don't remember what time exactly we end, but do you have anything else to say about this game before we move on to those last 2 games?
No, we can jump ahead to the last 2 games here. No,
right.
No issues there.
All right, let's move on then to, we got the Tampa Bay Rays at the Oakland Athletics. Rays with a 3.9 run implied total, Athletics with 3.3. Ryan Yarbrough is at least starting the game for Tampa. Greg looked up his AAA recent starts and he pitched one out and then 2 outs, 1/3 of an inning and then 2/3 of an inning was his last 2 games in AAA. So maybe not expecting a long start for Ryan Yarbrough unless you know something that we don't know. Do you have any interest in Ryan Yarbrough or anybody else from the Tampa Bay pitching staff, or do you have interest in the Athletics on the other side?
No, if I could expect, 5-6 innings from Yarbs here, it would be a great spot for him. I just don't see that happening. I think 7.3% of the field on DK is going to be really disappointed in having spent 5,600 on him. I don't expect him to go more than like 2 innings here. I think it's probably Jalen Beeks out of the pen after him, but I don't know how long Beeks is going to pitch for. He went, I think it was 30 and change pitches on the 28th. So it's been a few days since he pitched. He's on full rest, but I don't think I would be targeting any pitching from the Rays, even against a completely pathetic lineup like the A's here. So it could be a great spot with different pitchers, but it's not the right spot today.
Okay. Any Oakland bats that you can get to?
No, not really. Low end lineup. I don't really like any of the bats. Sheldon Neuse is probably the best bat in this lineup right now. He's not very good. Shout out to our pal Woody, who is a friend of his in our Discord chat. Sean Murphy, Piscotty. Yeah, there's not that much to like here. Okay. Yarbs is capable of shutting them down, and then the Tampa bullpen's pretty good.
All right. That's easy enough. On the other side, we've got Paul Blackburn going up against the Rays. Do you have any interest in Paul Blackburn or the Rays bats on the other side of it?
I definitely take some shots with some low owned Rays bats here. They are inexpensive across the board. They're low owned in single digits, mid single digits for basically every hitter in this lineup. Nobody above the 4,000 mark on FanDuel. Only Wander Franco above 5,000 on DK. So you can definitely stack some Rays from top to bottom. Plenty of power going up against a nothing pitcher in Paul Blackburn. So far this season, Blackburn 24.7% strikeouts is well up from what he's done for his career. I expect that to come down. I expect the hard hit rate that's currently at 43.4% to actually go up. So I don't think very much of Paul Blackburn as a pitcher. I think you could target him with some bats.
Okay, makes sense. Anything else that you want to say about this game before we move on?
Just those Tampa bats would be Wander Franco, Randy Arozarena, Brandon Lau primarily, and then mix and match the various hitters. Don't sleep on Mikey Zunino at the bottom of the lineup. League leading barrel rate last season at 24.3% if he had qualified better than Shohei Ohtani.
All right, perfect. All right, one game to end it out. We've got 2 solid pitchers on the mound with Carlos Rodon for the Giants going up against Julio Urias for the Dodgers. Do you have any interest in Carlos Rodon? And then do you have any interest in the Dodgers bats on the other side of this?
Yeah, I think this one might be an all 4 sides for me, with the most limited shares probably coming in the San Francisco bats side of the equation. But I'm definitely going to have some Carlos Rodon. I think he looks very, very strong, particularly because he's priced up at 11-1 on the FanDuel slate, by far the highest priced pitcher. That's got his ownership, that and the matchup against a ridiculously loaded Dodgers team, I should say, have his ownership sitting at just 10%. I do think that Carlos Rodon is talented enough to go through this lineup a few times cleanly, find some additional strikeouts. They're very difficult to strike out. Top 4 hitters in the projected lineup were all below 20% and well below it through the course of last season in terms of strikeout rate. Even the aggressively heavy strikeout guys, Cody Bellinger was only 26.9%. That's high, but it's not 30 plus. It's not Joey Gallo levels. So it's difficult to find strikeouts, but Rodon is spectacular. I mentioned 43.2% strikeouts so far this season. That's up from the 34.6% that he posted last year. 34 and change is probably a little bit more realistic in the long term, but he's just so good. So I'm happy to get to a few bonus shares of him on FanDuel for the price. They can find ways to pay up for it with all the cheap pricing. Dodgers bats, you can definitely take some contrarian shares of them though against him. They were on that list of teams that I mentioned. If you see this team at 0.5% ownership, don't really care who the pitcher is. I can definitely take out some shares of them. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Trey Turner, Justin Turner, Max Muncy, Will Smith, Cody Bellinger, Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux. They plays 1 through 9. I mean, there's nobody that you wouldn't want to roster here. Gavin Lux actually probably won't be in the lineup lefty, but outside of that,
yeah, just a really strong lineup. And if they're coming in at this low of ownership, hard not to like them. What about the other side of the game? Do you have any interest in Urias or the Giants bats? I think you said it's an all-sider, but expound.
Yeah. So Urias, let me pull up the pitch count here. I was going over to that board. So 81 in the last outing, 75 the start before that, reached 6 innings, struck out 4 in that last outing. A little bit still of tempered expectations with Urias in terms of the pitch count, but I think he's relatively there. So far this season, only a 20.5% strikeout rate, though, 11% walks, 4.57 xFIP, not inducing the swinging strikes at nearly the same rate as last year. But he's a talented guy, lefty pitcher going up against a team with a decent amount of righty pop. I don't love the spot for him, but I think at 3.5% ownership for 9,400 on FanDuel, I just have to be above that in terms of game theory. Like, I just think he's too talented to be that low owned. So he projects out well for me in my model based on mostly last year's numbers. 26.2% strikeouts last year, a 11.2% swinging strike rate, was great at suppressing power. So I think he can go through this lineup a few times over, find some strikeouts. They strike out much more than the Dodgers do. So I do like the spot for him just based on ownership. 8,400 is also too cheap on DK. So the ownership at 16% over there is probably about appropriate. And you could argue a little bit low for him at that price.
All right, perfect. And you also said that you like the Giants bats just as a low owned play in this one.
Yeah, just here and there, they've got some very capable right-handed hitters in that lineup. I'm thinking of like a Wilmer Flores. If Wilmer's going up against a lefty, I don't, any given lefty for 3,000 multi-position on FanDuel, 4,300 on DK for 0.5% ownership from site to site, you can grab some shares of that as a one-off. You can put them together with like a Darren Ruff, a Thairo Estrada, some of these other hitters. It's not a great version of this lineup, the projected one, but there are capable bats in there. I don't love it. That's why I said it would probably be my my least exposed part of this game, but they're all low price. They're all low owned. So you can justify it.
Okay. Anything else to say about this game before we close it out?
No, I think we've consumed most of our time, did a lot of talking there. This is a great slate. I really like this slate. I'm looking forward to building some lineups over the next couple hours.
Yeah, me too. So we answered the question from the chat. Our favorite stacks on FanDuel. I said Houston. You said St. Louis. Just two contrarian stacks we like for a large field GPP. Let's also say you're getting a little bit chalky with your bats. Do you have a favorite pitcher for a large field GPP on FanDuel?
Favorite pitcher for a large field GPP on FanDuel. Oh, geez. Who did I say that I mean, if you want to get really nuts, it would be Herman Marquez, but yeah, that's a little bit over the top in terms of advising somebody to do. So okay, let me jump back to the board here and give you a better answer than that. I think Rodon is interesting, actually. The pay up to get different with Carlos Rodon is very interesting to me. He's technically negatively leveraged, but we're talking about 10% ownership when you're getting Woodruff at 27.5, Kopech at 21, Joe Ryan at 14.2. The Joe Ryan spot is also very, very good, though. That's too low in terms of just the overall raw ownership, even though it's an 8.8% probability mark. 14% ownership for him in that spot, probably a little low.
Okay. All right, I think that should do it. Congrats again on your big win, Terry. Everybody, as you head out, please give us a like and subscribe so you can be notified when our shows go live. And also remember to subscribe to the Awesemo Bets Best Discord. The link is available in the description for this video. And if you're playing NBA DFS tonight, stick around the Awesemo channel for the NBA Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock coming up next. Thanks for watching.